All right, well, welcome everyone to this panel for STEMxx Chats. We're really excited to chat with our amazing panelists that represent a variety of paths in the field of education and dig into some related topics that you may be interested in. STEMxx Chats is a new initiative that started just in June. One good thing that came out of 2020. And what we're doing at STEMxx Chats is building an ecosystem of empowerment for women in STEM. We want to break down barriers between career stages and locations. We want to propel positive impact makers and really help people have fruitful careers over time, right? Understanding what goes into that, understanding the balance between personal life, professional life, how to thrive holistically, and support each other long term as we do this. So we've been hosting a number of public events such as this one. And if you've missed any of that, we have some of those videos are on our YouTube channel. You can check out interviews with women in STEM as well as panels such as this that are available to you there. We also have a number of videos that we have recorded. This started as part of our launch pad for our small group discussions. We started recording these and posting them as well so more people can benefit, but we really see these as, good tips and tricks, but also good conversation starters to have maybe with your local group. We have a number of chapters of STEMxx Chats that are starting around the world that are using these as jumping off points for their own meetings. So feel free to check that out. And you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter and get the latest. We're getting excited making our plans for the spring. So stay tuned if you have ideas for events that you'd like to see. You can get in touch. We're actually going to have a little bit of a different format for the events in the spring where our core group members and our chapter leaders are actually going to host different events. So those are going to be a little bit more crowdsourced. We can get a lot of variety in there. So we're really looking forward to that, and stay tuned for details. All right, so we'll be a little bit unconventional this time and do introductions at question 2. I want to do the first round where each of our panelists can describe her current role. And then afterwards describe, who you are, what your path was to that current role. Claire, would you want to kick us off?
Sure. Okay, so I am currently a professor at San Jose State University in chemical engineering. We have a pretty heavy teaching load, but we also have lots of opportunities to get reduced teaching loads. So I've been teaching core chemical engineering courses now for 20 years. And so the cool thing I think about this job is that I get to do so many different things and I'm always learning. So I think when I was in high school, I don't think that always learning was something that I would value as much as I did starting when I was had graduated from college and was out about 4 years. And I started to realize that a job in industry is very structured and you're doing very much what they expect you to do. And you don't have the opportunity to have many initiatives. So I think not only can you have initiatives in doing some research at a place like San Jose State, but you also really have to take your teaching seriously. So you're always thinking about, what do I do to get the students to learn this thing? And you try something and it fails. So this semester I tried putting projects in my course, doing project-based learning, and that failed. So so I keep trying. I'm like, what can I do next time to make it work better? So there's always this opportunity to improve yourself. And it's also very edifying because you interact with a lot of really good students. So plus that, there's also these perks of getting to do, like every 6 years, we get to go on a sabbatical. So now I've worked in industry for 1 year in Palo Alto. And then I went to India doing research. And this past year, I went to India giving workshops to faculty on effective teaching. So you get to do a lot of cool things and different things. So it's always changing. that's what I really like about the job.
Very cool. Bridget, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I am a high school teacher, which hopefully is evident by things like my decorated background. So I teach math, physics, and engineering. And I'm also the STEM coordinator at the school that I teach at. It's a Catholic all-girls school. And I will say that my favorite thing about being a high school teacher is that I get to regularly do things like wear this Christmas sweater, which, oh wait, hold on.
Is that a cow?
Yes, it is a cow Christmas sweater with lights. And
Wow.
I was gonna wear it today for you guys, but I figured it might be a little bit distracting, so I did not. But that is definitely my favorite thing about being a high school teacher. My second favorite thing about being a high school teacher is the relationships that I get to develop with my students. So that's mostly what I look forward to talking about today. But those are the two best parts.
Great. How about Gail?
So I am a program director at a nonprofit organization that's based in California, but we support education nonprofits in 19 different countries around the world. We bring tech solutions and training, so really kind of bringing in the computer labs, bringing in the laptops, but then also training teachers and staff how to use the technology, which I think is really great. I would say the best part of my work is we also partner with corporate technology companies, and I train them to become the volunteers that then work with the teachers in those various countries. And I love how I get to work with these techies who then come back after their volunteering trip, and they are totally on fire for education and how important it is and how technology can really be used for good in the space of education. So that's really the best part of my job, is when I get to come back after the projects and these employees from tech companies are just totally on fire to support teachers and have a whole new level of respect for teachers. And I think the other part of your question was kind of, how did I get here? I was actually a teacher in my first life as well. I was an elementary school teacher, took a very windy road, and ended up where I am right now. But that's kind of what I guess I would say is, you just never know where you're going to be, even in education.
Very cool. Yeah, and hopefully we can unpack that a little more in the next round of questions, and kind of as we think about the journey and kind of what shaped you in each of those decision points, and ultimately leading up to where you are now, which is perhaps not the final step either, but that's very cool. How about Mingming? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I'm an instructional designer at UC Berkeley Executive Education. So what I do is I work with professors and help them design really engaging and effective courses, both online and offline. So because of COVID, I've been focusing on the online courses. And the really interesting thing is a lot of professors, they didn't get training in teaching, so they're actually really eager to learn. You might think that some professors might think they know how to do it, but a lot of them are still learning, and it's a really rewarding experience for them, because by working with me, even though I'm not the subject matter, I know about education and learning design. So I know how to design a course that can combine synchronous and asynchronous learning experiences, how to get them to engage with their peers while reflecting on some questions themselves, and at what points do they have the aha moments that engages them to keep going. So all those design decisions are my value to the professors, and what I can learn from it is, it's just really interesting to learn about different industries. I just finished designing a financial technology course, and now I'm doing a business analytics course, a project management course, and a women leadership course. So you just keep learning about new things all the time, and that's my favorite part of my job.
Very cool. So maybe then we can go in the reverse order. Now we know a little bit about, your role, what you do. Tell us your story. Tell us how you ended up here, what your journey was like, key people, key moments in that journey, anything you want to point out to us. Ming Ming, do you want to go reverse order?
Okay. So when I was in middle school and high school, I was really bothered by the fact that a lot of my classmates were talented, but they didn't really fit well in the existing education system. So I wanted to do something about it, but I was too young. I didn't know what my options to help more students like them. And then in college, I just started doing extracurricular activities, helping underprivileged students in Houston to do project-based learning. So how can we make learning experience more engaging? And similarly, I co-founded a nonprofit in Africa where we kind of empower people to build their own wind turbine or water pump using the locally available materials. So I did a lot of education-related projects in college. And after college, I took a year off teaching middle schoolers in a remote village in China. And then I got inspired by the advancement of technologies. So I went to Stanford to learn more about learning and technology. And after that, I started working for like a few organizations where I designed their online and offline courses. So it's always, I think my career is always focused on education and how to make learning more valuable and more beneficial to the students.
Very cool. Very cool. And I love how you point out like those different realizations you had, right? Where you notice a need around you and how you could do something about that need eventually, right? First, it starts with the observation, and then little by little, you gain the tools to actually, really contribute to that. It's very cool. Great. Let's see. Reverse order means Gail, right?
Yeah.
Tell us, Gail. Tell us the story.
So I grew up wanting to work for Disney, and I thought 100% I was going to be an animator at Disney by the age of 25. I'm far older than that at this point. And I haven't accomplished my dream. Who knows? It's still possible. But I went for my undergrad. I decided to do computer science, the way of coding. This was going to be on track to become an animator. I quickly learned that my personality didn't do well to sit in front of a computer all day long. I know 2020, it's changed us all, but so I kind of did a lot of soul searching. I asked a lot of questions. I actually talked to other students and professors, and eventually came to the point where I figured out what I really enjoyed doing. The whole time I had been tutoring students, teaching cello lessons, and I just really loved the energy of teaching. And it was actually my roommate. She's like, "Why don't you become a teacher, Gail?" Like, it's so obvious, right? So at that point I did. I pivoted. And so to those of you that are maybe finishing off your undergrad and thinking, "Oh, I don't think I'm in the right spot," it's never too late to pivot. I was pretty much 1 year away from graduating, ready to graduate, and I completely switched into education. So then, as I said, I taught elementary, different grades for over 10 years. But another pivotal part of my career was I had always wanted to teach abroad. And so I went to Morocco, and it was really there that I saw the inequity of education in a really powerful way between those who had everything versus those who had nothing, and education was the one equalizer in that society. So I came back and went back to grad school, and eventually I found my way now to the nonprofit organization that I work with, where we do support underserved schools around the world. But I have to say, don't be afraid to take random jobs. I took a random job to becoming a researcher at the medical school because, again, I thought maybe I like writing reports. Also not. And I also dabbled a little bit in the ed tech world and wrote sort of curriculum materials for teachers. Also kind of soon realized that wasn't my thing. So it's okay to all of you out there that don't quite know. I'm still not sure what I want to be when I grow up. So just kind of step into whatever falls your way, see if you like it. And if not, just pivot again. So that's kind of my journey.
Very cool. Very cool. Love it. Bridget.
So I have known that I wanted to be a teacher since I stepped into Mrs. Kalusinek's first grade classroom.
When you were in first grade?
When I was in first grade. I have known that I wanted to be a teacher since I was in first grade. And because Mrs. Kalusinek was so amazing, I thought for the next 10 years that I wanted to be a first grade teacher. But fortunately, when I was in 11th grade, I had a crush on the son of the first grade teacher. And so I conveniently found time during my study halls to go and volunteer as her aide in the first grade classroom, and discovered that I definitely could never teach first graders. So that was a really important realization in my journey. Thanks. So everything somehow works along the journey, right? Even a crush on a kid that's a year older than you. But so that's when I realized that what I actually got the sense that I much more wanted to do was teach high school. And so when I went into college, I majored in math, because I figured it was the thing that I would be able to teach the best, because I was very good at math in high school. So I started, I went to the University of Notre Dame, and they don't have an education program, but you can take classes at St. Mary's, which is across the street, which did. So I started taking education classes at St. Mary's and quickly realized that, unfortunately, education programs, especially in undergrad, tend to be less than rigorous. Just to like, the experience of taking them is you feel like you're doing a lot of busy work and they're really not learning anything. So I decided as an undergrad that I would not major in education. I would just major in the subject matter, and I would go into teaching, especially because I did go to a Catholic school, and I got the sense very early that I also wanted to go back to Catholic education, where you don't need a teaching credential. So I decided to major in math, which was really hard, but which I got through by adding an Italian major, because I realized that I'm a little bit double-brained. I really like the analytic nature of the STEM subjects, but at the same time, I need the sort of creativity, and like math majors, they don't really talk to each other. They just do math. So I added the Italian major because Italian majors talk to each other a lot. So I studied abroad and all that. So I went into teaching pretty much right after I graduated, and I just took a job. So I was applying for a math position, but I ended up getting an offer as a physics teacher. And at first that threw me a little bit, but I thought, well, I can do math, I can do physics, because I did a Bachelor of Science in math. You can often choose whether you do a Bachelor of Science or arts in math. And so I took it and discovered a love for physics, and teaching physics, precisely because of the project-based nature of the course. So I taught in a Catholic school. You teach everything under the sun. So I actually didn't even teach math for the first couple of years that I was teaching. I taught Latin, religion, physics. and then eventually math. I took a little break from teaching for a little while to go back to school and do some nonprofit work, more because I just had an opportunity that arose, not because I wanted to step away from teaching. And then ended up here in California, where as I was going back into education, I was presented with this outrageous prospect of starting a school, which definitely was not ever anything that I ever wanted to do. But I had this really interesting experience where I like listed out, I did one of those like soul searching, like as I go back into education, like, what is the job that I want? And I listed out and I said, I want to teach in a place that is STEM education, highly innovative, really all about the learning process. And then I suddenly had somebody call me and say, we're looking to start a STEM-based Catholic school that is highly innovative and really concentrated on really good pedagogy, only doesn't exist yet. So I went into this crazy 2-year adventure of inventing a school and then starting a school. And that was fascinating because I had always said that I did not want to be an administrator. I only wanted to teach. I didn't want to have any hand in like dealing with the nonsense, but I jumped in and I dealt with the nonsense. So it was a short-lived experiment, but I learned a lot. The school actually only existed for that 1 year. We shut down with COVID, not because of COVID, but with COVID. There's a lot of different pieces that go into starting and sustaining a school, as you might imagine. And so it just wasn't quite sustainable. And so now here I am. God is very good. And so I was able to find another job right away teaching, just back to plain old teaching, not having to worry about all of the big picture of things. Again, as a math and physics teacher, now all online currently because California has been in lockdown since last March. But what was really awesome about the position that I took is that I also am the STEM coordinator for the school. And with that, what it really is all about is thinking about the structure of STEM in the school and how we can provide a lot of opportunities for girls who are interested in going into professions in STEM and really engaging them, giving the exposure and experiences they need to succeed and pursue that. So that's my path.
Awesome. Very cool. And Claire, tell us your story.
So my story is unfortunately not all that edifying. I'm one of those who didn't always do everything right. And so as an undergrad, I never thought I would do anything but go into industry from my undergrad years. And I worked for 1 year as an engineer, a chemical engineer in the Boston area. And then I was completely miserable. I was the only girl in the group, and they were all these kind of, anyway, it was not easy. So I quit. And then I worked in New York City for a couple of years, just having fun. And then I decided that I wanted to go back to chemical engineering. So I went to graduate school. And so I went and I got my PhD. And then I got this pretty cool postdoc opportunity in Switzerland at the ETH, but I didn't publish. But I went back and I had this 1-year fellowship with the U.S. Agency for International Development. And so I'm a pretty good writer. So I could, write good proposals and do that kind of thing that, so I actually thought that because I had other talents than STEM, I thought maybe that could give me an opportunity to do something really interesting. But in the U.S. Agency for International Development, I was basically a glorified secretary. I was just filing things. I think I got to write one press release for Congress once, which all sounds really cool, but in a 12 months to do one thing like that. So I was like, I'm out of here. So I took a job at DuPont. So I worked for 3 years at the DuPont Central Research doing, process development, scale up of biochemicals and stuff like that. And then I had to get out of there. I just couldn't stay in industry. I couldn't handle the structure. So I have this sister, Betsy, who's a professor, and she was like, you really have to try academia, Claire. So I applied and I got the job at San Jose State, and I've been here for 20 years. And I think it was definitely the right move. So, and I want to say that most of the faculty and in our program graduated from Stanford or Rice or UCLA. So they come from really good PhD programs. So it's not like, it's not like you can, I mean, the competition is high to get into the programs to teach at a place like San Jose State. But there is room for people who are just kind of get there. So I think my background made me a better teacher in some ways, because first of all, I understood bad students because I was one. And I've had so many different experiences. And I think having worked in industry makes it much better for teaching chemical engineering. So I think all those experiences made it, were helpful in a way.
Very cool. And for people who don't know, maybe would you want to break down kind of like, there's a question in the Q&A about being a professor, like what is needed, attaining a PhD, what this process looks like. Could you have maybe like a little bit of a background there, like different types of professors, different types of institutions?
Sure, I can talk about that. If you want to go to a research university somewhere like Stanford or even the UCs that are research universities, you really have to always do everything right. So if that's your dream, is to be a cool professor like Alice is going to be one day, then it behooves you to study really hard and get really good grades, which I didn't do. So there are other opportunities for you to teach with a PhD if you aren't the type of person who's perfect. Okay, so you can teach at a community college. You can teach, actually, there's some really good high schools out there that benefit. It's a benefit to have a PhD. But then places like the California State University, every STEM professor has a PhD. So, and the advantage of being at a place like the CSU is that there's not the heavy pressure to get grants all the time and build up a big research group. Whereas there is pressure to be a good teacher, and you still have the opportunity to do some research, but without the pressure to have an impact in your field. So a lot of people find these really cool niche research projects that nobody else is working on. Like one guy studied redwood genetics. I mean, it just wasn't the hottest topic, but he was the only one working on it. So so you find something that you can do where you can teach students how to do research, which is really very satisfying. So that's, I'd say, what the CSU has to offer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that choose to go to a university that's more teaching focused, right? Because they enjoy that.
Even some who go to very top schools. There was a girl that was doing her PhD at Stanford, and then she went to MIT for her postdoc, but she really wanted to be a professor. So she took a year off from her PhD work, and she taught classes for me while I was on sabbatical in India. So, but I mean, it was an opportunity for her to learn experience teaching. So, and that didn't change her mind.
Very cool. And what would you say surprised you the most about teaching? I mean, you said, being focused on industry, and then, you ended up in teaching. What would you say, like, with the flexibility of the work environment, was that kind of a happy surprise?
That was definitely a happy surprise. I think one of the kind of challenges that surprised me is that the students change every year. I mean, they're definitely, I mean, it's getting a little harder to teach, I think. I mean, maybe it's because I'm getting older. I don't know, maybe I think the young faculty are better able to understand this new generation of students. I have a hard, like, I mean, this was a shock to me this fall. Because everything was online, I wanted them to do Excel, learn the program Excel, in Microsoft Excel. And more than half the class had never used it. And I'm grading their finals, and I'd say about half the class has not learned how to use it.
Surprises in 2020.
What am I going to do? Okay, so I start thinking next semester, what am I going to do? So we learn Excel, but I mean, it's good to try to think about how to figure these things out, but it's definitely changing with time.
Oh, very cool. All right, awesome. So I guess taking a step back, I want to talk a little bit about education in general. Maybe, panelists, your thoughts. What is the most exciting thing about a career in education right now and in the future? Maybe after COVID, maybe in a continued situation, but in general in education. And I'll leave open floor. And if you want to signal by unmuting yourself, feel free.
I'll go ahead and I think I'll start because I am, sort of like the classic definition of what it means to be in education, right? A high school teacher, full out. It's awesome that we have a lot of representations here of different ways of envisioning education, but when it comes to what's exciting about education, I think that the key point that I'd like to make this evening is that if you want to be a teacher, what you need to care most about is people. And I remember that when I was interviewing for my first teaching position, the dean, the academic dean who was interviewing me, she asked, do you want to teach because you love your subject, or do you want to teach because you love teaching? And I knew from the outset that for me, it was that I just wanted to teach. And the reason for that is that I saw very much teaching as a person-centered thing. And I think that part of the reason she asked that is that what you're really passionate about is your subject, then your place in education is definitely in higher education, or maybe like the AP class kind of route, but certainly much more into the advanced subject matter. But that in general, if you want to be happy as a teacher, what you need to care about is people and understand your role as a teacher as being a former of people, a former of your students, that the knowledge that they're actually getting out of your class is much less important than like who they're becoming and like what you are facilitating as they're learning it. Certainly within the high school or lower bracket, but I think even in just the example that Claire just gave of the Excel, right? Like what you have to care about is not just that they managed to crank something out in Excel, but that somewhere along the way you have structured it such that they learn Excel while they're doing it. And these are the things that if you want to be happy as a teacher, that's what you need to be most interested in, because the final product, right? If you think about, everybody thinks about their own educational experience, right? There's like a couple top students in the class and everybody else is like struggling through, right? And so if you as a teacher go in like wanting to like get those top students and like make sure that they like ace all their classes and whatever, and they learn everything, and that's what you're banking all of your worth on, you will be disappointed always, because there's going to be like 2 of those a year. And so what's exciting about being a teacher is the investment that you make in people. And then I think that other people can talk about, how then forming these students now, you have a very clear realization that you're investing in the people who will do things in the future.
Very
I think
cool.
one of the things that I most love about the education world also is, if you think about it, it really infuses all aspects of society. And I always said, yes, when I was in the classroom, my title was teacher, but really you play so many different roles. And just to echo what Bridget said, absolutely, I think it's human centered, it is people centered. You are there for the incredibly rewarding experience of feeling like you can just nudge this other person just slightly in the right direction. But what I also loved about it was, you can be an artist and you can innovate because you're constantly, year after year, getting new students. You have to, right? Whether it's how are we going to show them that Excel still matters. And I think the other aspect of it, is I remember I had to become all of a sudden this beetle expert, because in the second grade curriculum, it's the insect life cycle, and we had these beetles that came into our classroom. And so I just love that there's so many aspects to being a teacher. It's not just lesson plans and sort of teaching. There's so much more to it. And I also would say there's so much more that you can bring to it as well. And I think that's kind of the exciting aspect of education. Like, if you're really excited about music, you can infuse that into your teaching. If you're really excited about sports, you can infuse that into your teaching. And so you're able to really be creative and bring all of, you know, who you are to connect with all the various students that you encounter.
I was just going to say that I agree with all of that, because there's a lot of different things that you end up doing, and I think that it's important to realize that teaching at the university level, it is about people, but you really have to know your subject really well. And I give a lot of these teaching workshops, and I try to encourage the young faculty, because the first time you teach a class, you don't know it very well. And I would say, I always tell them, you're not really an expert at the topic until you teach it 3 times, because then you understand the nuances and the significance of certain equations, and you have a better sense of how to bring in real life examples, because you think about it a lot. And so those are, so it's something that it's a developing career. It's not, it's not just you stand up and deliver the information. It's something that you grow into. And I think there's a lot of things you can do also at the high school level. But also, just if you think that you do like research, or when you do your PhD and you think that you enjoy that aspect of it, you still get a lot of cool things connected with the research at the university level. So it's really a career that gives you an opportunity to do so many different things. And of course, the things that you remember the most are, the people that whose lives you've changed. I mean, at a place like San Jose State, I mean, we have a lot of underrepresented minority students, and I mean, you just feel so happy when you see them grow and succeed and actually make something of to be able to be the breadwinner in their families, where there's a lot of drugs or other things in their background, and they can stand up and be the leader in their family because of the education that they got. It really does. It's very satisfying to be an educator.
Yeah, I would say that education is not just about teaching people the knowledge and skills, but also inspiring people. Like, you want people to be touched by who you are, not just by what you're saying. There's a really good quote by Maya Angelou. It's similar. I can't quote directly, but people will forget what you say, what you do, but they will never forget how you make them feel. So I think, like, in education, you can really make that impact on people's lives. So after years, when they reflect back on their high school math classroom, like, they can remember that key moment, that aha moment that got them excited about the subject. That's really significant impact. So another thing I think about education is there are so many rooms for innovation. And if you think about a podcast or your TikTok video, that's also education, right? Like, you're learning about how to cook, how to dance, how to think about the world. And a lot of them are not well integrated into how we learn. So how can you be an innovator in making education kind of more, integrating more things and learning from different sources? And how do you create technology to enable that? Like, there are just a lot of opportunities for people to build education startup to teach in a really radically different way. So it all depends on kind of your aspirations and what you want to achieve. There are a lot of opportunities.
Very cool. All right, now we're all super inspired. Everybody wants to go educate. And so harnessing that, let's talk a little bit about preparation for teaching. And I know this may default easily into like what to study, like what to major in. So let's handle that first. So, you talked about what you studied in your undergrad, but maybe we can do around just like advice for college education, college preparation to become a teacher eventually. Anybody who wants to start?
I can. I would say, kind of as Claire was sharing earlier, we need really good, passionate teachers that know their subject matter. So whatever subject you really enjoy, kind of throw yourself into that, take all of the courses, talk to the professors. That was something that I wish I had done more of in undergrad, was going to office hours. I thought it was only if I needed homework help, which I did, but I was still not willing to go. But just get to know your professors, and I would say whatever subject matter. I know this is STEM Talks. We desperately need just really good teachers, even at the lowest levels. I think for me, one of the devastating things about teaching at the elementary level is you have elementary teachers who didn't have a good math experience themselves. Mm-hmm. And we need good math teachers, even for fifth graders, because it's setting the foundation for middle school, high school, college. And so I would just encourage you to sort of really study hard and just know your subject well. And if you are in the STEM fields, which probably you are if you're listening to this, highly invite you to consider even going and teaching at the lower levels, because we need good subject matter people, even at the elementary stage.
So I would just throw in there that it is important to like your subject, because you're going to be going over, and I mean, I've taught this introductory chemical engineering class now, I don't know, 15 times. And every time I teach it, I enjoy the subject. And I'll just say that I think the major difference, if you want to do a pure science, you have to know all the nitty-gritty details about the science. Okay. Whereas in engineering, it's more, there's a lot of math. So you have to be comfortable in math, and you need to know the science, but probably not as deeply or as rigorously as you would in a pure science. So if you have a really good memory, then you can probably do well teaching a pure science. But if you can rely on mathematics or process, then engineering is probably more practical for you. But in engineering, you have to kind of have a little bit of a business mindset, because in the pure sciences, it's all about understanding how these principles apply in a given chemical reaction or a given biological system. Whereas in engineering, talking about those things is not all that useful if it can't make money. So engineers, really, we have to be thinking commercialization. So, and that's kind of the mindset that you want to get the students. If they're going to go into industry, they have to have a sense of, this is a waste of time, because it's not going to get us any more, it's not going to get us, it's not going to help the company. Whereas in chemistry, that would be like a scandal to say this is a waste of time, because every chemical reaction is equally important. So those are some things to think about in terms of science or engineering. My guess is that if you're going to teach math, and Bridget, you go ahead and answer this one, but I think you'd have to have a lot of patience, because you can show the students how to solve a mathematical problem But if they don't understand it, it's like, I don't know how else to say it. I think, they either can do it or they can't do it. I don't know. Whereas I don't think that we have those types of problems in the science and engineering fields.
Yeah. This is my cue. Teaching math is really hard. It is really, really hard, and it is really, really painful. And the better at math you are, the harder it is to teach it. Because when you understand it and the student does not, you're just like, what do you mean you don't understand it? Which actually leads very well into what I was going to say, is that if you want to be a teacher, what you need to have very clearly in mind is that you need to learn how to be a good teacher. Because, and I just, as a little asterisk though, Claire, I'll just disagree. Math is not, you can do it or you can't do it sort of subject. Everybody can learn math. It's just that it takes everybody a different amount of time, and it takes some people an extremely long time, just as a little asterisk there. And that's actually a really important attitude to have as a teacher, because going back and forth between these two ideas of that you need to learn how to be a teacher. There's so much research out there that actually tells you like that goes into like what it actually takes to be a good teacher, right? And for example, there are all these studies that they have done. There's teacher researchers who have studied things like the effect size of different techniques, for example. And for example, if your teacher does not believe that you can learn, it decreases the effect of their teaching and your ability to learn. It like goes into it is like a negative effect. It means that the student will not learn, right? And so you as a teacher need to know like from basic to really intricate things. Like if I believe that my student can't learn, guess what? They actually can't, but then to actually learn what it takes to teach well is really complicated, and it is really hard to be a very good teacher. And I went into teaching originally because I did go to Catholic school, where I was aware that like most of my teachers they weren't credentialed or whatever, that they were highly educated, and I sort of had this like, you don't have to get a license to be a good teacher, like, and unfortunately, education programs tend to not be very good. So I didn't do the undergrad education. And then I am, as of Saturday, I'm a Master of Education. So that's fun. I just finished my master's program, and unfortunately I didn't learn that much, I wish I did, but I had 2 methodology classes that taught me nothing. Quality of the programs is just you have to look really hard to find a good program that is actually going to help you teach very well. And it's also important to know that if you do want to get a master's there for teaching, there's 2 different kinds of masters. There's a master's in education, and then there's a master in the art of teaching. And they're really for kind of 2 different lenses. Alice, did you want to ask a question?
No, I was just going to point out to our audience that maybe this is your future opportunity to change master's education or teaching education. Somebody out there is going to do it.
Yes, that would be excellent. But it is helpful to know that there are 2 different avenues for getting a master's, and that most masters also can contain some kind of credentialing route. So it is very easy to get a credential after your undergrad, and you can do it simultaneously. It's kind of stressful, but even if you do, and actually maybe Gail, I don't know if you can talk a little bit to the undergrad experience of education, because you do at least have the sort of like accompanying or your student teaching and all of that kind of thing. Whereas, but it is possible, like for me, I just started teaching, I knew enough physics and I knew enough math and I had great teachers. And so I just kind of was like, I can do this. I'm a natural teacher. But there is so much to learn, and especially when it comes to the kids who are not naturally good at school. Those are the ones that you need to learn to teach for. Because somebody who's just super bright, you throw it at them and they pick it up and they run with it, but it's all of the rest of the students. And that's like 85% of the students. And that is where being a good teacher, at the high school level, you do need to know your material, but it has much less to do with that, because by the time you're in college, like somebody's only coming to Claire if they already know that they can handle some chemistry and some engineering, right? Sometimes, more or less, right? Whereas everybody has to take high school math, everybody. And that's where it is extremely important to understand what it takes to help these students to succeed, and that there's a lot of really specific technical knowledge. And for me, what I found, since my education program was not very helpful, and that though you need to do a lot of independent research and do a lot of going to conferences, reading books, following really great teachers on Instagram and Twitter. I cannot tell you how much I have learned about teaching from Instagram. Esther Brunot, if you haven't followed her and you're interested in teaching math, follow her. She's amazing. But you need to find the ways that will help you become a good teacher, like the professional organizations like NCTM for the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, because it at least in my experience, is very hard. And you like get a mentor, but the mentor doesn't help, and they don't actually give you feedback on your things. And you really have to get out there to want to learn how to teach your students better. And the students themselves have really become the motivation for that, because you know that you're not serving them the way that they need to be served when you can't meet their needs. So that's the background that needs to go into being a teacher if you actually are interested in being a decent teacher.
And for instructional designers, we don't have to be subject matter experts, because we work with subject matter experts to help them design their courses. So you can come from all sorts of backgrounds. So myself, I did applied mathematics and cognitive science in college. And then I got a master's in learning design and technology.
So Ming Ming, you can back me up that everybody can learn math.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I know a lot of instructional designers actually come from other careers. So yeah, for this role, there's really no limitation on the education you need.
Yeah, and I would just say, if you're sort of in high school or currently in an undergrad, I would look into sort of if your university does have an education department. I was fortunate enough at the University of Michigan. So the first year was all classwork, as Bridget was saying. It's pedagogy, so it's how to teach and how to do it well. And then the second year was completely where I was student teaching. And I think that was a really great crash course of seeing, is this really something that I want to do, that I enjoy? And it's hard, but at the same time, I think for me that was a confirmation that yes, I love this space. It's giving me energy even though I'm physically tired. And just again, to echo what Bridget was saying, I was naturally good at math. And so math was actually really hard for me to teach, because I didn't understand why students weren't just getting it. Meanwhile, I hated reading growing up my entire life. And I ended up becoming a literacy specialist because I really empathized and knew what those struggling readers needed and were going through. So in some ways, maybe you should look into teaching what you're not good at, because you can really empathize with your students in that way.
Yeah, and I'll add there. So one of the useful things that I did learn in my grad program was that, I'm sure many of you have taken some kind of like personality sort of test, like that. And we looked specifically at the Myers-Briggs personality test, and they break it down into kind of 4 major categories. And it was really fascinating to see that although in like kind of general society, those 4 categories are more or less evenly divided. In education, they're not. And there tends to be specific people who go into education, and they tend to be people who are like very structured. They can they follow the schedule day in and day out, homework, grading, follow the lesson plan kind of people. That's not everybody, thank God, but it is a large majority, but far more than that kind of representation in the student population. And so what ends up happening is that the kids who are good at school, and it's a lot like what you were saying, Ming Ming, I think in the very beginning, like there are some kids who like know how to do school, and they're the ones that do well. And it's in a certain sense because the educators themselves are, sort of continue the system that they have done well in, and then there's these huge percentages of students who are either like very artistic or very creatively based or very people-centered or things like that, that sometimes don't do very well in school because of the way that it's structured. And so what that means is that there is a need for teachers who are out of the box teachers, who will be the kind of teachers who allow for what these divergent, who are not actually divergent, they're like just half of the population, students need to be able to succeed in different ways of understanding, different ways of showing their knowledge, things like that. And so it's interesting because there is a sort of like, I don't know, a little bit of like a rat race to education, like the semester year in and year out. But there is, as people were saying, very much room for innovation and very much a need for meeting the needs of very, very diverse students.
So,
Claire, do you have something to add quickly? I think we'll do just one more round. Time has totally flown. You guys have shared awesome advice, awesome insights, and we're coming up on an hour. So I want to be respectful of your time, and any last bits of wisdom or advice you'd like to share by way of preparation or other advice? Go ahead.
I just wanted to, I put it in the chat box. I don't know if the
Yes.
participants have access to that, but it's you can take a survey free that you can find out your learning style, and there's a whole body of knowledge around it. You can, it's not just about how you learn. You tend to teach how you learn. So this is relevant, and I actually make all of my students take this at the beginning of the semester because it actually helps the students who are not the ones who are good at learning. They don't know why they're not good at learning because their learning style is often different from the way the teacher is teaching. So there's these types of things out there that can be very helpful for the students and the faculty to use to help the students. So I just thought I'd share that with you all.
Awesome, thank you, Claire. And I just sent it to all attendees, and hopefully I can paste this in the video link as well. Great. Anybody else? Final thoughts here? Bridget?
Sorry, yes, I had a final thought that I wrote down because I wanted to make sure. I have one final thing to say to everybody who is listening to this, which is go and visit your old teachers. Do it. Until you're a teacher, you just cannot imagine what it means to hear from a student who, we'll just take one who remembers you, right? Let alone one who you would like to go back and express to them that they somehow affected your life. As a teacher, it can get you through a year and a half to have one student come back and be like, hey, thanks for that one time we did that project. I really learned a lot. Please, whoever was your favorite teacher in high school and college, wherever you, first grade, just let them know. Just say thank you that you still remember them, because it makes a huge difference in the life of that teacher.
Yeah, don't forget your elementary school teachers. They probably will remember your name. I can probably vouch for that. So don't forget about them as well.
And also, when you're learning in high school and college, always reflect on how your teacher can make you learn better, so that you can maybe apply some of those to your own teaching in the future. So, a lot of teachers they learn from their teachers. So whatever things that their teachers are doing well or needs improvement, take notes on that and think about how you can do better for your future students.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, panelists. This has been incredibly enlightening. Thank you to all of our attendees. I wanted to end with one of my favorite quotes, which is, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The power of education. Corny note to end on. But thank you guys all so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the spring.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks so much for having us.
Alice.
Thank
Get
you
out there and
guys.
educate
You're
the
the
world,
best.
everyone. It's worth
Thank
it.
you all
Do
participants.
it.
Take care, everyone.